Yeah. So this is our third seed swap session, and Charlotte from the Culture House is here to talk to us about Grimsby. Charlotte, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see such a full room of people from what I can gather from around the world. That's amazing for me here in little Grimsby in England. So I'm going to tell you about my work and our work in Grimsby. The town is a town of deprivation, although there's a lot of money here as well. It's really mixed. There'll be some of you in the room that will have heard of Grimsby because of its fishing heritage past. It was a really thriving fishing port. It was one of the biggest fishing ports in the world in years gone by, before the decline of the industry, which had a big effect on the town and its kind of poverty levels and just being overlooked. And certainly culture has not been on the agenda at all. So just to tell you a bit about myself, I was born in Grimsby. My dad is from Grenada in the West Indies. He came over as part of the Windrush generation to the UK and finally settled in Grimsby, met my mum, and I'm here. So, and I went to live in London, studied in London, and studied design and media management. But what that gave me in London was obviously exposure to fantastic cultural stuff across the board. And I've got a real passion for kind of live performance, live music, and went to lots of things and really sort of absorbed it up. And then when I came back to Grimsby, I was actually only 25 when I came back. And it was very much, there's that phrase, cultural desert. And that's very much how it felt. At the time, I had no idea necessarily what the arts were or arts development, things like that. That the arts probably sounded something kind of out of my league, not realizing that that's what I had been absorbing myself in, because it's the way you experience things and the way you talk about them. And I eventually got a job working for some people who were running a little film festival. I mean, it was tiny, and I was just helping them with some PR because I wanted to do journalism and writing. I'd been doing that in London. And then I got a casual job with the council, just helping out on art exhibitions. So I was serving the wine at exhibition openings, just thinking, oh, this is nice. And then eventually worked for the council as an arts development officer. So you'll see from what I do now that there's been a real evolution in that sort of story, from serving the wine to actually delivering quite an extensive programme of cultural activity in the town. So it was very much a case of looking around. There's not a lot around us, and we had certain projects that we were delivering through the council, but they were very niche and only served a certain audience. So over time, I just started to think basic questions like, oh, how much is this costing? And how many people is it reaching? Who is it for? Can't we spend the money in other ways? Like, who's accessing this activity? And so I eventually left the council and set up on my own under the name of the Culture House. And that was to deliver a range of projects. So I'm just going to share my screen and just talk you through what the Culture House does and why. And you'll hopefully gain a good understanding of what's going on in Grimsby through our delivery, and then some other things that are happening as well. So I'm just sharing this now. And I'm fine. So the Culture House is an arts organisation based in Grimsby. And this is just a shot of one of the productions that we hosted last year in the car park in the town as part of a project called Our Future Starts Here. And you can see that it looks quite futuristic. But the whole premise of this was about hosting innovative artistic work in public spaces for free, so that we can drive up engagement in Grimsby. So I'm inviting you to sit comfortably while I talk you through who we are and what we do. And I'm going to focus as we move on to a particular project called Our Future Starts Here, which is our sort of flagship and placemaking project, but there's information about other activities as well. This is a shot, as you can imagine, from Grimsby as part of Our Future Starts Here as well, another touring work that we hosted in the town in a local park. So, as I said, Culture House is an arts organisation based in Grimsby. We're an Arts Council England national portfolio organisation, and some people will know what that is and some people won't. So it's basically we receive regular funding from Arts Council to deliver our work. For 13 years, we were on project grants, which means that you have to apply every time to Arts Council, every time you want to do something. And you're not necessarily paid for salaries or things like that, you're just paid for your actual project. And what's been a challenge being in Grimsby is that sort of infrastructure around you, and the strategy has been lacking to kind of support our work. So we've really wanted to move forward. We've been delivering, flying the flag, but getting that regular investment has been difficult because all the sort of stakeholder partnerships and things haven't been in place historically until now. And we've done an incredible amount of sort of advocacy and joining the dots to get into this position, which has taken us a long time to do that. So Grimsby is also an Arts Council England priority place, and that means that Arts Council recognise that there's not enough investment going into Grimsby compared to other parts of the country, and also they recognise that there's the will there to do something, so therefore they're willing to put their time and investment in to support more development in the town. We're also a member of Without Walls, which is a touring network partnership. That's a national organisation which supports touring outdoor work to reach more places in the UK. So we put a bit of money in and then we get subsidised to book the artists that they commission. And it means that those artists can tour to more places and reach more audiences. So what we're trying to do is widen access to culture for the people that live in Grimsby, because there's not a lot happening here still, even despite our efforts, it's still kind of tiny compared to other areas. We want to offer residents new experiences, improve the cultural offer, increase the amount of touring work that comes to the area, as I said, raise pride of place. And this is really important because, as I explained at the beginning, with the whole sort of fishing industry demise came a bit of a wave of we're rubbish and depression, and the sort of narrative about ourselves was negative. So people would be kind of apologetic from being from Grimsby, as well as people being proud at the same time. But generally, you'd apologise for being from here and kind of, you know, laugh at yourself while people were laughing at you. So something needed to be done about that sort of perception of the town. That is externally, the external perceptions, but also internally, there needed to be a lot of work done on how people perceive their place, why they perceive their place in that way, what we can do to change that. Another important point is about not necessarily waiting for a green light to do any of this stuff. You know, it's just kind of, right, let's just start doing this and kind of put a positive spin on everything instead of it all being kind of, oh, you know, Grimsby is rubbish or da da da. So we started purposely talking about Grimsby in a very positive way, internally, externally, and using positive language and just trying to kind of erase that narrative a bit as well. So we have we have done studies now on whether our work helps to raise pride levels, and it's now proven that there's quite a strong impact of what we do. And then as well as the other things I mentioned, we endeavour to support local talent development as well, because we've been talking about bringing these touring artists in, but obviously there's lots of creative people here trying to do things. A lot of them don't understand the funding system. They don't understand about that full professionalism of the delivery. And what we try to do is kind of layer what we do with local, regional, national, put it all together to make the perfect kind of cake where local performers can learn from more seasoned national companies and organisations. And that goes for us as well as an arts organisation. We've always been quite outward facing and willing to take mentoring support from other organisations nationally. We're in touch with quite a few organisations that are much bigger than us in a sort of mentoring capacity. And it does really help to lift you from the mindset as well of working in that place. So it's not just the fact that we're supporting people who work here, we need that support ourselves as well to kind of raise the bar, raise our mindset at the same time. So we work across indoor and outdoor spaces, and our delivery consists of festivals across music, performance, outdoor arts, different events, a range of creative partnership projects. We commission artists, and I'd say 99% of the time, everything we do has some kind of participation element. So we're sort of driving up the participation in culture and creativity as well, which is really important because it's about not just about landing stuff in the town. And we do believe everybody is creative or should have the chance to be creative. And this very much marries with Arts Council's new strategy, Let's Create. And I don't know how to say this without sounding a little bit, but we were already doing this, and then Arts Council announced their new strategy, which is the Let's Create. But I think from what I can gather, that as a funder, there's been a lot of work going on internally with Arts Council where they're trying to change the modus operandi and who they're reaching and things like that. So we'll have participation elements, development workshops, and we deliver on the cultural communities element of Arts Council strategies and also the creative people element as well. So we've got 4 aims as an organisation. One of those is placemaking, which is working collaboratively through place-based partnerships to use culture and creativity. And we want our programmes to be inclusive and accessible to all. Creation and production. So we produce the cultural offer with other partners, and also we want to connect people to each other through the projects. As I said, talent development's a quite strong element of what we do, and also advocacy and promotion, which might sound like, well, why is that one of your aims? But obviously, we've been doing that a long time, advocating for culture in terms of its transformative power, talking to the council a lot about all their other strategies, because they've got economic development, environmental strategies and things like that. And we've tried to point out, over quite a long time, that culture needs to be at the heart of all these strategies. So there's a lot of work gone on in terms of bringing all the different place strategies together, so they're not all separate, because it's all linked at the end of the day in terms of impacting on place and how you maximise the impact of that. So we talk to the regeneration teams now at the council, the wellbeing teams and things like that. So this is our mission, which is to transform futures using the power and creative, sorry, that should say "of" in there, to transform futures using the power of creativity and culture. So just a quick overview of outcomes from 2022. So our work reached a combined live audience of 40,000 people. This was through quite a mix of activity, which I'll tell you about. And we managed to reach digital audiences of 70,000 people, which is obviously really high, but I'll explain how that happened in a minute. We hosted a month-long exhibition with a partner, Ørsted, who operate the largest wind farm in the world, which I'll explain about as well. And we commissioned a series of place-themed storytelling as well for the town. So these are just some shots of our work from last year. These are some of the touring acts that came to perform in spaces in Grimsby. So the one on the right, that's a newly regenerated space in Grimsby, and it's been regenerated to use for events. Having said that, there's only been 2 events hosted there in the last year because there's still not a lot happening, and ours was one of them. There was another one. So this is what I'm saying in terms of there's all these other strategies and money being spent, but there needs to be more marriage of how that actually works. How does that come together? Who's delivering the events? When are they hosted? Who are they for? So that kind of bigger vision for strategic transformation is still in its infancy, really. So these are a couple of the touring shows that came to the outdoor spaces in town. And we had a remit from the council because they commissioned us to deliver a project. So we had a remit to increase footfall into the town centre and use the newly regenerated spaces. And as a producer, these kind of things do raise questions with me, because as an arts organisation, we do sometimes feel like a lot is put on our shoulders, or we put a lot on our own shoulders in terms of, you know, we need to get thousands of people into the town centre with this, you know, fairly low budget and use these spaces and things like that. And then we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing that? Is it to support retail? Is that the job of arts? And where's this all going anyway? And what does that future kind of look like, really? Because we know now that we're never going to revive town centres into these retail spaces. So what we're trying to do is kind of look at these spaces and see how they can be used for more social community connection and things like that, with the retail being one element of that. But I think we're trying to look at now at like where are these town centre spaces going? Like, what are they used for? What are they going to be used for in future? What is the money spent on? Because we'll all have examples of how councils have spent in the past lots of money on paving and things like that. But it's the actual activity and the engagement is really important, because that's what brings the people together. So we've always advocated for more money for culture, basically, as well. This is a shot from Festival of the Sea, which is hosted in Grimsby, and we delivered it for the first 2 years, 2021, 2022. And this was a placemaking project, sort of harnessing Grimsby's fishing heritage past. The reason I'm showing you this image, because you know, that could be from any event really, but the reason I'm showing you this image is because we had a really strong partnership with Ørsted, who are a wind farm company, who, as I said, they operate the largest wind farm in the world off Grimsby. So Ørsted wanted to tell their story of who they were, what they were doing out of Grimsby, knowing that people can see the wind turbines, but not necessarily what that means for the town. And it's a huge operation, and it's obviously all about sustainable futures and things like that. And so this is like a new narrative for the town and a new vision. So Ørsted became our partner for the project. But the reason I'm showing you this picture is because I think we pride ourselves on delivering those fun moments, really, even though, depending who we're talking to, you know, there's a mix of the arts and the culture and everything else, but it's about the connection, the fun, bringing the smiles. And as a sponsor and a partner, Ørsted obviously wants to have that impact on the town. They're probably more interested in this kind of fun connection community than the you know, large scale spectacle artistic side of things. So we find ourselves a lot looking at what that reality is, what do the partners need, what do they want, and if we're working with sponsors and things like that, looking at what their actual aims are for that sponsorship, which is often, it's not about them sponsoring the big shiny thing. And we do enjoy this kind of story. This was an interactive storytelling activity that obviously went on outside the tent, and it was just fun, especially after COVID and things like that. So it's capturing those nice moments. And then these are some other shots just of the Orsted engagement as well on the day. So yeah, there's no shots of the sea at the moment. And you can just see how it's the colour, it's the fun, it's the enlivening spaces, and how people just enjoy that engagement as well. And again, an example of some interactive storytelling here, which there's in Grimsby, there's obviously, as anywhere, there's a lot of families who want something to do, something nice to do with their families, and through audience research, we found that a motivator for coming to our events is something to do with the family. So, we will survey people. So again, people aren't necessarily coming because they want to see this amazing art that we're presenting. It's more about that connection time. So just back to the 70,000 views on YouTube. For a project that we did, and this was an example of a place project, quite a strong place project, which was connected to Festival of the Sea. So along the coast in Grimsby, there's a town called Cleethorpes, which is next to Grimsby, but you can see all the vessels kind of going out of Grimsby and coming back, and that's kind of taken for granted. If you go for a walk along Cleethorpes, you just see them going past. And we were going for a walk one day, myself and a colleague, and saying, I wonder where do all these boats go to, basically. So we decided to turn that into a project. So it was a really basic question, where do these boats go to that are leaving Grimsby every day and coming back? So we designed a project, and there was an episode of Dave Spud. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Dave Spud, but a children's animation on CITV. And ironically, we didn't know about it because someone else in the team had said, have you ever seen Dave Spud? Da, da, da. So Dave Spud is a quite a popular animation, is actually set in Grimsby, because the writer was from Hull, and then he decided to base it on a town similar to Hull but not Hull. So we contacted the animation team for Dave Spud and said, do you fancy working with us on a project? So this is how things evolve. And basically the team from Dave Spud were really enthusiastic and generous, and they came to Grimsby and did a workshop with the full school. Actually, this is just some of the kids working on this Where Do All the Boats Go project. So I'll circulate it afterwards, the actual animation. So the kids designed the characters that were in it, they did the voiceovers, but through the project the kids also learned about where do all the boats go. So they talked to all the logistics companies and things like that, and they found where they all go, what they're carrying and things like that. So it was a creative project that educated people about place, but then brought in this really strong partner. And then this became a sort of spin-off episode of Dave Spud that went on their YouTube that has now been watched by thousands of people. But the most important thing for that is the kids who are from Grimsby got to learn more about their place in the present time, not sort of apologising where they're from, etc. Like quite interesting information. They got to work with a really cool sort of creative team. And then the legacy of that is we're now talking to them about looking at different topics about Grimsby and things like that. So this is where the different partnerships come in with, obviously, that team, the school, ourselves. And then that's out there now as a video to educate anybody around the world about where all these vessels go from Grimsby. And then another placemaking project we've been involved in recently, it's called Paint the Town Proud. So this is bringing together different partners again. The one partner we work with created murals around town to a certain level, to a certain standard. And we work with them and other artists from outside of the region to develop and produce heritage murals for Grimsby based on the fishing heritage. So that was about the pride element of the town and telling that story of place, but putting the colour and the interest and the fun, and people now obviously going around and looking at these as a bit of an attraction. So it's kind of celebrating place, taking people to different spaces in town. And this area where the mural is in an area which was real fishing heyday, which is now needs a lot of work, basically. So it's really uplifted that community. And I don't know if you can see right in the centre of the image, there's a sort of barrow boy. He's actually carrying fish pallets. So what we did was research some of the actual fish merchants, put the names on the pallets, and that provoked a very emotional response, like a genuine emotional response from either the fish merchants that were still alive that came to the opening, or their children who were there. And this sort of whole pride element really meant a lot to people. So we've really connected things into real things that had happened. I'm going to speed up a little bit. And then moving on to our latest project, which is Our Future Starts Here. So I've already explained about us providing more cultural opportunities in Grimsby and improving quality of life, raising pride levels and things like that. So what we wanted to do was start to shift this narrative around the town of either the fishing or the sort of bad negative image that it's got as well. So we wanted to focus on the fact that Grimsby is actually at the forefront of renewables, with a lot of renewables businesses, huge businesses based in the town and operating out of the town. And they've obviously chosen here for a reason, probably because of the affordability factor and the fact that we need these industries and these investments. So this project has got a sort of multi-stranded aims in terms of telling the story about Grimsby now in terms of its renewables position, and people who live here understanding what's actually going on in the town now, because a lot of people in the town wouldn't even realise that this is part of our town now. They just know the names and that they're based on the docks or similar. So we wanted to start telling that story of where we are now and where it's going, while knowing that we all need to start thinking about sustainable futures as well. And how do we do that in an accessible, friendly, non-overwhelming sense? Because we're all aware of the need to transition to sustainable futures. So that message, we've got the message. It's kind of, how do we do it? And we're not saying as an arts organisation that we're on that road fully yet ourselves. So it's kind of like, how do we go on this journey together, knowing that there's going to be a transition probably over 5, 10, 15 years that we need to go on. So, and then at the same time, it was about obviously doing this through arts and culture. So this artwork that you can see, which is Gaia by Luke Jerram, I mean, it's been everywhere. It's been around the world. It's been to lots of places in the UK. It's been to China, America. So we weren't doing anything new in terms of presenting, different new artwork, but it was very different for Grimsby to have this in Grimsby. And people were actually so grateful and overwhelmed, like genuinely, that this was in Grimsby, because we got all these comments, you know, didn't expect to see this here, thought we'd have to go to London to see this, etc. So we programmed a full month of events around that artwork, and started engaging people in the conversation. So this was almost a hook, really. It was a centerpiece, but it was about let's start talking about sustainable futures. And we worked with a local school which had got a little eco committee, some sixth formers, and we got them to design like a guide to going green. And then we worked with a local designer to sort of design that leaflet and things like that. And now they're doing a lot of things. And there's like a youth green influencers panel and things like that. So we see this as a very much as an evolving project. It's kind of open-ended, because as the world changes, we'll kind of change with it as well. And then what we did alongside this was design a green survey, as we called it, which was to get an understanding of where people were at with thinking about sustainability. And that was really interesting what we got back. And as I said, you know, as we know, most people know about it now, don't they? But I think what came through was a lot of worry about sustainable futures, and people saying, yes, you know, I'd like to understand how to, you know, go green, if you like. So we've got a basis to work from, and I'm happy to share that survey if anybody is interested in understanding just a snapshot of some public feedback on what does it all mean to you, and what help do you need, kind of thing. And again, knowing that we're an arts organisation, so again, this is a lot to put on your own shoulders or an arts organisation shoulders, but actually the funder, Arts Council, is quite interested in this, because from a kind of governmental perspective, they understand that arts and culture can be the vehicle and the bridge for people to access information that's otherwise quite boring. So they were some things that came back. And then one thing we did was just to show you about, as an arts project, we commissioned a company to support the community to chalk and design an 81-metre wind turbine blade across the centre of town, so that that was their connection to this sort of wind farm. But again, this is kind of placemaking and people taking part in that as well. So yeah, as I said, we do the research, and 95% of people said that the Gaia programme enhanced their experience of living in North East Lincolnshire. 97% of people said that the programme made them feel proud of where they live. And this just helps us to understand the impact that we are making, because, you know, we're kind of just doing this, and we have obviously got our values and our mission and our goals and things like that, so it's considered and, you know, delivered to a plan, but we hadn't been great at asking for that kind of feedback, so we've started factoring that into all of our evaluation and things like that. So just really quickly, our Future Starts Here edition that we just hosted in May was a 3-day outdoor event with touring work. Then we also hosted a market of local creatives, but with all mixing that with like sustainable crafts, opportunities to talk about sustainable futures, bit of mindfulness, nature activities, and things like that. That's the shot of the performance work, which was called, it's slipped my mind, I'll come back in a minute. And then really quickly, just other things we do, which again are our placemaking, so populating the local green spaces, which don't see enough activity, with picnic in the parks, which are really accessible. We have live music in the bandstand, using green spaces again. And then we're just developing a town centre programme that's going to be a bit more regular, using these spaces as well. and these aren't in Grimsby, but this is just an example of where we then want to go with more mural art that's kind of linked to place stories. So that's that was a lot, but that's just a small amount of coverage of what we're about and what we do. So ultimately, what I realized after doing this for 13 years, wasn't consciously doing that at the time, was the sort of transformational power of the culture, and realizing we'd been a really strong part of the shift that's happened. Because now Arts Council are investing more money in the town, not just with us, but with other people. And we have really banged the drum and also banged on doors and tables at times, to help shift the mindset locally that we need to use culture and creativity to achieve that transformation. And it's tough, it's challenging. But as I said, it's going back to that point as well. While all these other regenerations initiatives are happening or not happening or taking years, we're just getting on with it. And actually, it's important that we have things in the here and now as well. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions or whether we just move on to the next element.
I just stopped your share there, Charlotte.
Yeah.
I hope that's
Okay. That's fine. I'll just come out of there myself and then I can see you again.
Does anyone, are there any questions for Charlotte? It might be helpful to use the reaction hand, because then you'll jump to the top of my screen if anyone's got any comments. Or Uday, hand up. Hi. Yeah, and then we'll hear from Mark.
So do I get to speak
first?
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. So as I was looking at the pictures and your stories, what came to my mind is, what is the culture we are trying to nurture? Is it the culture of the past, or is it the evolving culture? Because when I look at the world that I came from and where I live now, I came from India, I live in the US now. I see that, and I'm myself a designer also like you. I find that art and design needs to create a dialogue about uncomfortable questions in the culture that's emerging. Questions about racism, questions about, accommodation, all of these things, because I see both at the religious level and at a political level, there's a lot of conflict and tension that's surfacing. And so my question is, have you had any experience of addressing these difficult questions, bringing them to surface and tapping into the emerging diversity of your town?
Yeah. How I feel about it is, I personally have a lot of strong feeling about a lot of the things that you've said. And then I think it's because we're publicly funded and we have a commitment to be accessible to everybody. I feel that at the moment, some of that is still suppressed within the delivery, but it's there, and it's choosing the moments where we're actually going to get serious about this. So I think our future starts here is a build, and we have started addressing diversity in terms of, we've got commitments to the diverse programming of artists, and I've worked on other projects where we've been serving more diverse communities and things like that. Although outdoor arts have been proven to attract diverse audiences out of any other art forms, because they're so free to come and go type activities. But I think there is the need to get political. That's how I personally feel. And I feel that I need to be careful about when that happens, but it will start to come through, because as I said, this will be an evolving program, and there's no denying that. Again, it's more instinctive, and it's what's your sense, what's your take on things, that everybody's starting to feel political now, when these questions need asking, and we need to talk about it all. So I think Our Future Starts Here, starting off with the sustainability, but that's only one part of a big picture. And we have brought in other subject matters, but we're aiming to have, you know, panel debates. And actually, as it's evolving, we'll be looking at, right, what's the content then for October? Like, are we going to knuckle down on something that's important? But I think to introduce it into that sort of mass consciousness without being patronizing to the audience, we just need to get people involved, and then we need to open it up. So I think that's coming, and there is that conflict of don't get too heavy before we've started, because we need to go on a journey, and that includes us as well. But I think as a culture producer and a programmer, I've got way more going on in here than is on there. And it's just making that assessment of when the right time to do that is through culture. And even personally, you know, I do write some things in certain places, but I'm careful what I say, because we're publicly funded and I don't want to seem too heavy, blah, blah, blah. So it's a bit of a balance, because it feels like a responsibility. Like, we do have a voice in a platform. And it can't be too personal, like where we want to take people, but obviously we do need to be addressing things that matter.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll just make one comment that from my own experience, I am realizing that I need to be bold in using art as a medium of expression and dialogue rather than a space for escape. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Dawn, and then we'll have Mark. Is that all right, Charlotte? But just quickly before you start, Dawn, just to say, if people need to leave at the hour, we understand that. We've allowed an hour and a half so we can deepen this conversation. But if for any reason you need to leave at the hour, that's completely understandable. Dawn.
Hi, thank you. And thanks for creating this space. It was really, really interesting to listen and to just see the imagery. I'm just wondering how, if you guys have to do this a lot, because I missed the beginning and I apologize for that, if you're doing more of this by yourselves, or if you're working in, you know, with the sort of statutory bodies, like if you're being supported by those statutory bodies, as well as potentially by the funders. I know you mentioned the Arts Council, but I just wondered how much of this is just, you know, you doing it, and how much of it is more collaborative and that you're being supported.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's the support's starting to fall into place, but it's definitely driven by us. And I mean, in terms of the council, do you mean like the council or anyone else? Yeah, in terms of the council, I mean, I could be wrong, but I get the sense that they're just happy that we're doing it, and they can go, oh yeah, that had a great impact, that project, didn't it? So I did have a meeting with them and tell them that they need to get on board with us more. So it's a unified voice and it's a shared driver. I mean, I was invited to, there was a town centre task force meeting, so we have started talking. There was different stakeholders there, but actually after our last event, where there was some trouble in the square, there was a fight and things like that, I realised then that we're quite vulnerable as a driving force, and I have raised that now, that it needs to be more of a strategic effort on a practical level, not just on paper and meetings. So it's that's evolving as well. And I think it's because it's where we are, it's difficult, because there isn't necessarily the capacity at the council, because everybody's really, consumed with their own jobs and things like that. There isn't necessarily that force behind it, or the capacity. So we do put a lot on our own shoulders.
Can I just, sorry, thank you, because it's kind of a really honest answer. I just think that in the work that you're doing, I feel like it's about well-being. It's about change, and I guess what inserting culture, this sort of cultural placemaking, sort of around the town. But ultimately, it's about well-being, and I think so. It's always interesting when I meet people, and it's the same for us, that we're always trying to challenge systems, and that has an effect on us. So for our own mental well-being, it's it's a struggle, because we're constantly having to challenge systems as we're trying to create these spaces and opportunities for communities. And so that's why I asked you that question, because what you're doing is wonderful. But I think, in terms of thinking about how we reimagine so much, we really need so much more alignment and collaboration. Yeah. And yet we're constantly meeting people who are doing it in spite of, or having to circumvent those systems. And I feel that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I agree. It's without sounding like a martyr, but it is really hard, and it's actually huge. It's huge in terms of what you want to achieve. So you're only putting it on yourself at the end of the day, but it is big work, and you are leading. So you're leading by saying, we've got this idea, we want to do this, and then trying to get that capacity around you to make it a bigger. We need an army of people, there's like 3 of us doing it. So I just don't know what the answer to that is, and whether that brings up another massive complex question about the arts and how much we do in the sector and how much we get paid, and well, it's your choice, you want to do it anyway. But I think we do take on huge stuff. That's how it is. And then, I suppose you do get to a point where you think, right, do I actually need to live a life now myself? Like, what am I even doing this? But there's the passion. And then, so it's passion driven, but I think it'd be good if we could have a session on that, like, where does the passion start for your own good? So Mark's been waiting a while, is it?
And I also think that coming back on that, Dawn, the way that arts is understood by the system is part of the problem. A lot of the projects I do in Canopy, we start with the system problem, and then we bring in artistic practice, and that's got its own problems as well, its own set of challenges. But there's a sense in which, at least at the centre, there's an acknowledgement by the system that they've got a problem that they can't fix, and they need a different way of coming together, of being with the community, because they've tried and they can't fix it their own way. And so what you do, Charlotte, is you start with the arts and the community, and then the system looks at you and goes, oh, that's a nice bit of fluff on the surface, instead of really seeing this is the powerhouse to achieve our aspirations for equity, for, so it's that, and I'd say the Let's Create hopefully is a step towards that, but even arts funding doesn't yet really see itself as a powerhouse for reimagining, for reworlding.
No.
Over to Mark quickly.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Great to hear the conversation, and thanks, Charlotte, for a brilliant presentation. So I'm based in Glasgow. I'm just come back as chair of a thing called GMAC Film, which is all about increasing diversity in film in the industry. And I hear so much resonance in terms of Glasgow as a place. Drumchapel is an area of Glasgow that I've got a lot of connection with, and it's all that stigma and apologetic about being there, but also that kind of pride. So there's so much commonality. The point I really wanted to make, it kind of comes back to your comment about being political. I think for me, I think it's really important for everybody to understand everything we do is political. What we decide not to do because we feel someone put a funding something, that is, we are political animals. We live in a political culture. And what I think the kind of neoliberal turn has done is trying to depoliticize things, say, oh, it's not about ideology and things like that. And it's just more, it's like a kind of greenwash or sports wash or whatever we want to call it. It's just lies. So that when you were talking about Grimsby and the fishing industry, what I started thinking about was how our relationship with the environment and how we've destroyed the life of the sea. So it's an extractive in the same way as a lot of areas of Scotland, central bit of Scotland, with coal mining. So that history is now destroying the climate in some of the most deprived areas across the world. So these connections, I don't think we can shy away from, and I don't think you want to, but I think you feel pressure not to engage with them. But so I suppose the last thing I'm trying to say is about this attack on the arts and the attack on the arts within education and how it's ramped up, the vocational things, as if you can't be a plumber and a painter, or you can't be an electrician and a dancer, or as if you're not going to listen to music, so for me, I think that's just why I love having this space to hear from others and speak to others, because I think this space of social imagination is a vitally political space, and it's the space where we've not been working collectively together enough, perhaps. So I'm really interested in, again, if there are ways that we can mutually support each other, because for me, this is, I'm on holiday and things like that. This is what I need to refresh myself, is to know that you're not alone. And there's a load of us out there that are fighting the same battle. So just, interested in your perspective on that. And again, thanks for all that really, really hard work, important work you're doing.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a real situation that occurred where with Festival of the Sea, because we wanted to host a placemaking festival for Grimsby, not necessarily about the sea, but some councillors wanted to host a Festival of the Sea, and they would only put the money in if it was Festival of the Sea. So we got the commission working with a national partner as well, and it had real potential. And as well as telling the stories of the past, part of the brief was to tell stories of the future. Let's not just talk about the past. And we wanted to host a panel on sustainability within fishing. This caused a massive hoo-ha, and we had to drop it, which was ridiculous. But we had one of the partners was a representative of the seafood sector, and he panicked. The councillors weren't happy because they just wanted it to be, wasn't Grimsby great when the fishing was in its heyday. But we wanted to look at the actual real reality today of what is going on, and people have been watching Seaspiracy and all sorts and getting educating themselves and seeing the reality of things, and we weren't going to go that far, but what we wanted to do was give them that platform, the industry, the platform just to talk about it. We weren't going to grill them or try and hold them to account. It was more like, right, here's a platform, tell people what you're doing about it, because people want to know. And in the end, it just got too complicated and was sidetracking us from the festival, that we just dropped that, which felt like it was a disservice to what we could have been doing. So I really understand what you're saying, and it does have real, this is the reality. Things like this happen in reality, where you then compromise on the reality.
For me, just that I you're out there pressing this, so it's trying not to take the burden on yourself. You know, you're the ones that are, you know, it's that system that is trying to protect the status quo that we have, this grotesquely violent and unequal status quo. So I think, you know, our job is to be there, you know, challenging at all points, but not necessarily to the to the detriment of our, you know, our health and well-being, and we do have to choose a battle.
And reputation, because you know, sometimes I think there's certain people in town, it's only a small place, who'll be like, oh, Charlotte's coming because you know, we're out there doing it. And that's what I mean about making decisions on where you actually position yourself, because I could be, you know, as a producer and as a person, as a programmer, I could be doing so much more. But I think it's that thing of working with public funding, working with council, working with councillors. We're not fully independent to do and say what we like, which has become evident, but we're trying within what we're doing, and it's a sense, it's an instinct of how to shape it all to somehow make sense of it and fit and present it back.
Thank you.
May I make a comment, please?
We've got Dawn and Uday, but Charlotte, let me just check in very quickly. I know you're hoping to. We've got another half hour. Are you feeling confident about what you can do? That you can take a few more comments?
Yeah, if it's useful to people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Quickly from Dawn, then quickly from Uday, and then back to you, Charlotte.
Okay.
So sorry, I was just going to say, you know, it's the whole time that I've been listening to this, and I think a lot anyway. It's that whole idea of like, imagine if you were supported properly, imagine if we worked more collectively, you know, imagine if, and it's not just what you're doing is trying to reimagine spaces and places from the ground up. But it seems like often we're led by decisions by people in so-called higher positions, whether they're funders or people in statutory bodies or wherever. And so it's sad that, you know, and I'm in Hastings, so I'm in another fishing community, but it's sad that you couldn't ask the questions or have the conversations that probably would have been really important for your town, because other people would have been affected or worried about, you know, how it might affect their profits or their sort of, you know, their, I guess, sort of, yeah, how they make their money or their reputation. But it isn't that part of placemaking? It's just giving a voice to people, making space, sharing space with people who often are unheard and unseen and don't often get that opportunity. And so it seems a little bit sad or even ironic that the work you're doing is in placemaking, but yet your hands are tied, so that you're not really able to do fully what you're trying to do as a placemaker. And so I keep coming back to that whole idea, imagine if.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like this is all so big, isn't it? And it's the sort of stuff we think it keeps us awake at night. And then you have to focus on the delivery of what you're doing, and you've got 30 grand, so that's what you're doing with it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's so much in there, and it just feels like the beginning now, even though it's been 13 years. It's like, right, this is a beginning, and there's so much to say and do. So yeah, this is all the articles I've ever wanted to write, but I'm trying to put it through a different channel. And ultimately, I think it's the stuff from when you're actually younger and you're looking around thinking, I wish people would wake up a bit to this and that. So I think having done a lot of delivery over the years, this is now the subtler channel. So I think this is my like revolution done in a way that I wasn't planning to. But you've got to just pitch it at the right level somehow. And it's quite useful working somewhere like Grimsby because it's a down-to-earth place. So you have to adopt down-to-earth engagement, narrative, communication. But yeah, I feel like I've just got started, really.
Adair, you had something you'd like to say quickly?
A quick comment, just to like reference a similar project. I wouldn't say similar, but a project one can learn from the past. And this is actually, I would like to tap into Mark's memory. Several years ago, probably 20 years ago or more, Glasgow initiated a project in collaboration with Doors of Perception to use, this is the time when Richard Florida wrote Rise of Creative Communities. And they were working on building a new imagination and a new brand of Glasgow through community action and all kinds of design actions. And I wonder if Mark has any engagement, memory, or opinions that Charlotte can benefit from. So that was my comment.
Yeah, don't do what we did.
Sorry?
I said, in short, don't do what Glasgow did. Glasgow it's just about shopping centres, and it's about events. It's about it doesn't engage with the people. It's about the money that comes in. You know, we've all been through a COVID pandemic. Glasgow's still one of the most unequal cities in Western Europe. Huge levels of child poverty, and they massively cut the budget to community groups, to organisations, and that's a city council budget and the health budget. Honestly, the city's devastated. And it's the small things they do are performative, and that's, you can go. I put my link into the Saying Collectives because we're trying to do a people's plan for Glasgow, because the official vision understanding is completely broken. So that's as as concise an answer I can give.
So were you involved in that project by any chance?
I've been involved in a lot of projects. I'm trying to break out of that cycle and do something that's really rooted in grassroots democracy and things like that, because I've worked in those systems for a long time, and those systems will kill you. So thanks for the question.
Charlotte, Rami has raised his hand, but I am aware that we've given quite a lot of time to questions. Are you up for taking one more, or do you want to move on?
Do you think we've got time for the exercise?
Yeah, so Rami, I think we're going to have to do the exercise, but thank you for your hand. And Rami, if you'd like to put your question in the chat, it might be that Charlotte could follow it up afterwards on an email or something. But yes, Charlotte, over to you. A little bit of an exercise.
Okay. So I don't know if anybody's done anything like this before, which some may have, some may haven't. So it's just really a bit of visualization, and which is something we'll do individually, and maybe make some notes, and then come back to a breakout room to talk about it. And thinking firstly about the power of the imagination. I know this is a lot to think about now that we've had the presentation and everything, but thinking about the power of the imagination, and because I forget how powerful that is and how important it is as well, because it's how we imagine the future, how we do anything, imagine solutions, put them into action. And thinking about as well young people being consumed by social media and things like that, and like not necessarily using their imaginations very much because their brains aren't free and things like that. So it was just a point really about how at least creativity and culture are imagination based, and we need to remember that that's a huge gift that we have. So that's just a kind of a point to take us into the next part. So what I thought we could do is just take a few minutes, which would mean maybe turning your camera off, a bit of deep breathing, close your eyes, So if we start in that position with just a bit of like gathering ourselves together, and closing our eyes and sort of going into quite a blank space in our minds. And what I'd like you to think about and start visualizing is your place, whatever that means to you, in 2053, which is in 30 years' time from now. And taking into account that we all had a shake-up with COVID, and even before that, a lot of us would have been thinking these systems are restrictive, they're broken, they need renewing, casting aside. So imagine that we could start again from where we are now. We had that opportunity, and starting to visualize in your mind and ask questions like, what does your place look like? What does that look like for you? Who is there? How do people connect with each other? How is that place organized? How does it work? What experiences do children have in terms of education and how they use their mind? How do we spend our free time? Thinking about things that currently fill our minds, like work, bad news, financial worries, worries about things we can't control. How can we work to replace that with other thinking that's more healthy for us? How is food organized? How do we solve problems? What's the system? We've talked about town centres, but do they even exist? What are those public spaces used for? Where are they? What about clothing? How do we communicate? What does that technology, how does that come into our world? What voices are coming through and what are they saying? And what is our voice within that? And what do we want that all to look like? So that was a lot of questions, but it's kind of thinking about if we could design a future look and feel and way of living, what would that look like for us and how would it work? And if you just spend a few minutes visualizing and then maybe take some notes down. So we'll give you another 5 minutes or so to visualize, make some notes, and then we'll just invite you into a breakout room to discuss.
Well, clearly, you all had lots more to talk about than you had time, because nobody came back until you were absolutely chucked out of your breakout rooms. Always a sign of a good conversation. So I think there were 4 rooms in the end. It would be lovely just to hear a few quick, dazzling images from each one before we wrap up. We've just got a few minutes. So how about, I'm just going to call out on people's rooms. How about Charlotte, Dawn and Jenny's room? A few dazzling images.
Okay, no, they're both on mute still. Sorry. I think one of the first things that Jenny said was that I guess it's about being rooted in care. And I thought that was really important because, you know, I think empathy is such a strong thing. It's a really important thing that we need to have. But then she also talked about not being too overwhelmed, I guess, by some of the work that we have to do. And it's true, it can be overwhelming, but sometimes we just kind of need to try and think about things from our own perspectives in this small, like we're a stone that we drop into a pool and we create those ripples. If we do something small right in front of us, then hopefully supporting lots of people, they'll create those ripples of change. So it was actually a really interesting conversation anyway, but that's it. I'll stop talking now.
Thank you, Dawn. John Mark Morag.
I may praise you a little bit, not quite as poetically as Dawn has. I think the words that we that really summarized it for me is how we were speaking about hope and the hope that people's contributions, skills, imaginations will really be valued, that works best when people are encouraged to work in small perhaps communities or geographic areas. That's really powerful and it can grow. There was a lovely reference to, I think I'm saying this right, Karen Godsey's Real Life Utopias, and likewise a bit of thinking about how we make time for listening so that we can really hear what people are saying. This is what's powerfully needed here, rather than being imposed upon by bigger, massive systems.
Thank you, Morag. That reminds me of something Bayo Kumalafe says, which is the times are urgent, we must slow down. And it's another way of saying we must listen. Yeah. Beautiful. Anya, Anna and Rami. Somebody.
Well, I'm happy to try.
Great. Just a few images would be wonderful.
The images were about relationship, orientation in the support of the relationship. How we're oriented in time in the spaces that we find ourselves and how those spaces are made. Is that fair?
Beautiful, beautiful. Lots of resonance with these three so far. Time, relationship, listening, care. Beautiful. Room 4, Kate, Shannon and Sion, maybe?
Nice try, but it's Sean. Yeah, I won't feedback because I was late joining the breakout.
Kate or Shannon?
Other than to say that the slowing down was the thing that, was the link to previous feedback.
Yeah, we hadn't gotten too far, Sean, by the time you joined, but I would say image-wise, green, water, life, being by water, travel by water, and this idea of relationality was definitely part of it, that people are in relationship with their place and know about it, and that we already have everything we need. And so we may just need to reassemble.
Beautiful. Guys, we're at the half hour. We've come to an end. Next time, we don't have one in August. I will send out an email because obviously we're a diminished number now. We don't have one in August. because we're taking sort of summer break and people will be away and what have you. But our next one will be on metaphors to explore Web3 and its possibilities for collective imagination, and what metaphors would entice us, especially me, who is a technophobe, out of my Play-Doh and Lego world and into these wonderful possibilities with Web3. And that will be led by Anna Rose, who's here. I've already made the Eventbrite, but you know what? I can put it in the chat, but to be honest, I'm going to send it you all in a calendar invite anyway. So come to that. It's in September the 13th. It just stands for me to say thank you to Charlotte and have wonderful afternoons. And thank you all for your wholehearted participation. And, you know, it really felt like community today. And that is deeply wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to me, everybody.
Thanks for sharing. Lovely to meet
Thank you,
all.
Charlotte.
Take care.